Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This event is brought to you by DataTalks.Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events. This event is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Just go there, click on this link, and you'll find out what are the events we have in our schedule. Then if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, now it's the best time to do it. Just go under the video, click on the subscribe button, and you'll have all our videos in your feed. And then finally, this is the most important thing. If you haven't joined our Slack yet, you should do it now, and then you will get to talk about different data things. During today's interview, you can ask any question you want. There is a link in the live chat. Click on this link and ask any question. And then I'll be covering these questions during the interview today. So that's all. So now let me just get the questions. Are you ready to start?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So this week we'll talk about doing postdoctoral research. So we have a special guest today, Eleni. Eleni is a postdoctoral researcher at the DIMA group at TU Berlin. So this is the same university where I got my master's like 6-7 years ago. This is the same group where I studied. So Eleni is working there as a postdoctoral researcher. She's doing research on spatial data, spatial big data analytics, and she's interested in stream processing in IoT environment. So she published her research in many data management venues like VLDB and others, and she published like one of her papers received the ACM SIGMOID Best Demonstration Award, right? It was one of the papers, right?
Yes, it is. It was a demo paper, so this is a special category of paper where you actually like demonstrate or showcase, a technique or a system that you have developed, and you go to the conference and you actually have your laptop and show how this works live. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. So Eleni holds a PhD in computer science from EPFL. So welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here today.
So before going into our main topic of doing research, I wanted to ask you about your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Yes, so you practically already covered most of it, but let me also say a few things from my perspective. So yes, I'm currently a postdoc at the Technical University of Berlin, and I have been in Berlin since October 2019, so roughly 2 years now. Prior to that, I spent 6 years in Lausanne, Switzerland, where I did my PhD in computer science and more specifically in data management at EPFL, which is the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. During my PhD, I also spent some time in New York, 4 months, where I worked at NYU. Before my PhD, I was in my home country, Greece, where I did my undergraduate studies in electrical and computer engineering at the National Technical University of Athens. So to sum it up, I went from undergrad in Athens to PhD in Lausanne and then a postdoc in Berlin. So I've been in academia my whole career so far. I had some interruption in the video, but I think so the question was about my topic, right? Big data, spatial big data analytics. My main research area so far has been spatial big data analytics. This is the broader topic of my PhD and the topic that I'm still working on, even though now I'm not focusing on that entirely. What is it? Broadly speaking, it is essentially the process of analyzing spatial data to find trends, gain insights, and answer questions. And then the next question you might have, of course, is what is spatial data? What is this data that we are analyzing? Spatial data is any data that contains some, geometric or geographic feature. So spatial data can be points in space that can, for example, correspond to GPS locations. So, you have, data that is about taxi rides, that's spatial because we have the location and the trajectory of a ride. Then it can also be lines that represent a road or a river on a map. It can be polygons that represent regional boundaries, and I think you get the idea. And these are examples that are in 2 dimensions, but also we have 3-dimensional spatial data. So that can represent something, that has volume in space. And there is also another category of spatial data, which are, and the main representative of that category is satellite images, because in such images you have a collection of pixels, and then for each pixel that corresponds to some geographic location. So this is also an example of spatial data.
So what do you usually do at work? Like, what kind of responsibilities you have now as a postdoctoral researcher?
Yeah, I do a few different things, I would say. Okay, first of all, I participate in research activities, and that, again, also it contains many different things, but it broadly means, working to solve some research problems or even thinking about new ones, participating in, project meetings with other colleagues, and writing papers when a project is mature enough and there are results that can be published. I also mentor students, so far mainly for bachelor and master thesis, but I also have some experience co-mentoring some PhD students. And currently I also teach a bachelor course. Sometimes I also have to disseminate my research by giving talks at conferences or other venues. Finally, another thing that I'm doing is not strictly tied to my job description, but it's that I'm also contributing to the international community in my field by reviewing papers for conferences or journals. If I look at my week, I would say this is usually what's on my schedule.
Is it, would you say this is a typical day of somebody working as a postdoc in academia? Or?
I would say a typical week, because I try to avoid multitasking as much as possible, because I don't find it effective. So I try to have some days where I can focus entirely on one activity or another. I would say this is how typically a week looks like. And I mean also, but over the course of a month or of a few months, the distribution of these tasks can also change, and maybe there are periods where some task goes completely away. For example, as you know, there are semester breaks where you don't have to do any teaching, or I don't always have papers to review for conferences, for example. But other activities like having mentoring students, having kind of some regular meetings with them, these are usually permanent.
You said that you're writing papers if there is some outcome to share. How often it happens? I'm curious that you do some research and then you don't have an outcome to share and you don't end up writing a paper. Is it something that happens often or not?
Yeah, that is a good question. What can happen is that you don't have results that are good enough to write a really good paper that can be published at the really at one of the top conferences in the field. So to have an idea and then results that are kind of top level. This is hard. I think it happened that initially you're targeting this kind of top level venues, but in the end your results make it hard for you to publish there. But then in my experience, if you still did some thorough and decent work, even if the results are a bit disappointing and not what you were hoping for, there's still a way to publish your work, because there is always some interesting finding in it. It's just that you might need to just go to a less competitive venue for that. But for me, if there are some reasonable results, and as I said, if you do a good job, this is usually the case, yeah, there is, it makes still sense to publish them somewhere.
And the top venues where you publish are usually BLDB and what else? So
Sigmund,
Sigmund,
yeah,
okay.
the
I
very
remember
top.
these two.
Yeah, these two are really the top ones. Yes.
So
yeah.
BLDB is very large DB databases, right?
Yeah, it's,
I still remember that from
yes. Yeah.
And Sigmund is like special interest group on what?
Management of data.
Right, mod management.
Yeah.
So this is like these are the places where researchers who work in databases, data management, big data, analytics, and all these things. These are the conferences where these researchers want to publish first, right? So these are the top.
Yeah, these are the top venues. There is a third one that's also, I would say, equally good. Is it's called ICD. So that's International Conference of Data Engineering.
Oh, okay.
I think these three. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, and is being a postdoc different from being a PhD student? So yeah, you mentioned that you need to do a lot of things like thinking about research problems, writing papers, mentoring students, teaching a course, reviewing papers. But PhD students also do these things, right?
Yes, you're quite right. You are quite right about that. Yes. So overall, for me, how I feel is that the main difference comes because in the postdoc position, you have more responsibility. So it's kind of the amount of responsibility that changes. And okay, maybe also a little bit, the distribution of time on these different tasks. So like going back as a PhD student, like still my primarily job was to work on my PhD thesis. It was clear that this is the top priority. I was also teaching as an assistant, but that was not more than, let's say, 20% of my work time. And from times to times, I also mentored some bachelor and master students during my PhD, but not so many and not so frequently, so like not every semester, for example. And then also in my PhD component, in my PhD research, I was mainly conducting research on my own. So like I had a lot of alone time to work on my thesis. So what has changed now, I would say that I have more mentoring to do. So like now I mentor students every semester, and also this mentoring, I would say, comes with more responsibility because I mentor not only bachelor and master students but also some PhD students, like a co-mentor. It is important to ensure that they will be successful, right? You don't want your students to just waste their time, working on something that is not promising. And then teaching also comes now with more responsibility. Now, before, as I said, I was an assistant, so I didn't have to think about, the tasks that needed to be done. I was assigned these tasks. I just needed to carry them out, and that was it. Now I am the one that runs the course, manages the course. So I need to organize everything and make sure that the course runs smoothly. So this responsibility falls on me. And then, as I said, in my PhD, I spent quite some, alone working time. But now I would say I do less research completely on my own and more in collaboration with others. And in my everyday life, this also means that I spend more time in meetings with other people. And I also mentioned the reviewing papers before, and I have to say that this is something that I didn't do much in my PhD, but that's normal because you are invited to review papers for conferences when you are a little bit more senior in the field. So that's usually you don't get a lot of these invitations as a PhD student.
So if I summarize, then you get a broader scope. So you do not get to do as many, as So previously you would just sit and do research yourself, but now you're more like delegating the work, right, to others. So others do research and you're helping them with that, right? Instead of just sitting there just by yourself and doing that, right? Did I summarize it?
Yes, I would say currently I actually kind of work a bit in two modes. I mean, yeah, there is a little bit of delegating aspect, which you can say happens when I work with a student, because I mean, still like if someone is doing like their thesis with me or their PhD, I mean, they are still expected to own their work and it is their own thesis. I mean, I help them, but I'm not supposed to do the thesis for them, right? So in that sense, I'm providing guidance. But then I also do some, again, not on a constant basis, but in, like say in the past year, I also do some collaborative research with other researchers that are more at the same level of seniority as me, let's say. So in that sense, it's more a collaboration. I mean, nobody's delegating anything to someone else, to the other person, but it's more kind of, sharing the work.
I understand.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, thanks. And then you mentioned one thing, I think that's quite important. So now a part of your job, so you have more responsibility, and the part of your job is you need to help others be more successful. So you have bachelor students, you have master students, you have PhD students that you co-mentor or co-advise. Now, so how do you actually make sure that they are more successful? Like, how do you do this? Like, how do you help them select topics? Like, because PhD thesis is quite a large piece of work, right? It's like for 3-5 years. So that's a lot of responsibility on you as well too, when you come up with a topic. So how do you help them be more successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, okay, maybe I can also talk a bit about, a master and bachelor students. So in this case, I have to say it's easier, of course. And most of my experience also is with working with master and bachelor students. Because in that case, I'm typically the one that proposes a list of topics, like I advertise these topics, and then the student picks the one they like, and then we potentially tailor it together to their interests. So, there it's a little bit easier. The scope is also smaller because, this is research that needs to be completed within, let's say, 6 months, right? So, that also limits a little bit, what you can do during that time. Now, in terms of PhD students, so far I have only acted as a co-supervisor, which means that also the responsibility is shared. But overall, how it works at DIMA, at least what I have seen so far in my time at DIMA, is that in general, we have a few bigger research themes in the group, like some bigger umbrella topics that, they are mostly, I guess, determined by the leader of the group, Professor Markle. And then students typically need to identify a subtopic that interests them within these bigger research themes. So already, the fact that there's kind of this bigger umbrella topics provides some guidance. And then from there, they come up with ideas, by reading, brainstorming, talking to their mentors, but also to other colleagues and fellow students. And that's why, then the whole group can kind of provide some guidance there. So yeah, for PhD students, I don't dictate the topic. They mostly have to come up with it on their own within like a bigger research team. But how I help them is mostly by asking them questions and talking to them to make sure that they really understand the problem that they picked, and to also make sure that this is indeed an open research problem. So, I expect the student, for example, to be able to clearly articulate what the problem is, like succinctly and like in a sentence, ideally, why it is interesting and important, and why it is hard and why it hasn't been solved before. So, usually I a bit challenge the student, and the student has to convince me that they can answer these questions about their chosen topic. And then, then we can go ahead with that topic.
Is it some sort of formal process, or the student just comes to you and you have a discussion over, I don't know, a cup of tea, and you ask tough questions?
Well, I mean, it is a little bit of a more formal process in the sense that, like, we have some like regular meetings with some structure, and yeah. Also, in some cases, it might be that I ask the student to actually, answer these questions in written form, because sometimes also writing down things helps you, structure your thoughts. And then, yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm the commenter, right? So there are also other people that interact with the students and make sure that they're working on something good.
But from what I understood, it's actually the responsibility of a PhD student to come up with a good topic. You're just helping them to make sure that the topic they pick up is good and they really understand what they want to solve, right? But it's more like coaching than.
Yeah, this is how it usually works. Yeah, I mean, overall in academia, I have seen, and I mean, this is also more or less how it was for me, right? In my PhD, like I was not assigned to specific topics that I worked on the specific problems. I was given a broader direction, but then, finding the specific research problem within that direction was my own responsibility. I mean, I have seen in other groups in academia that, especially for first-year students, it might be that actually the professor gives them some more concrete topics, like similar to how I said I give topics to master students. So like usually to get them started with their with the first research problem that they will work on. But yeah, I mean, as you said earlier, also a PhD is a larger piece of work. So usually, you're expected to publish 2 or 3 papers that will all be part of your PhD. So even if you are assigned a topic at the beginning, you're still expected that, for the next paper, you will be more independent in choosing your own topic.
I'm curious, how does it work? Like you have a broader direction and then a student come with a more narrow research topic. Do they just read a lot of papers and then see which ideas they like, and then they just run these ideas by you and you say, yeah, these are cool ideas, let's dig deeper, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, okay, yeah, it could also be that we provide a few more pointers about what is still open in this broader topic, because since the topics are broader, it also means that there are other people also that work in the broader area. So we also want to make sure that each student has a separate topic from the other students and they don't overlap too much, right? So yeah, we also have some pointers about, okay, these are not taken yet, or like in this direction. Yeah.
And by the way, so you said there are a few bigger research themes in the group. What are these themes at the DIMA group? So I know IoT, right, is one of these topics. What are the others?
Yeah, there are practically 2 bigger topics now. So one is, yes, IoT, or like, building a general purpose data management system for the IoT. This is a system that we call a nebula stream. And then there is another topic that we call Agora. And this is a unified data infrastructure for building ecosystems. And in these ecosystems, we want to bring together different data assets that can be data itself, but also algorithms, models, computational resources, so that users can combine all these resources and they can use them to develop their applications.
Is the DIMA group still involved with Apache Flink? Because I remember when I was studied there, it was like a very big thing, and a lot of research was focused on Flink. But now, since Flink is a more independent entity, is it still the case?
Yeah, not really. So basically, in a sense, this nebula stream system is kind of the next Flink, you would say. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you see, this is representative of how the DIMA group works. Before there was Flink, and a lot of researchers were working on different problems related to that system. And now we have Nebula Stream and Agora, and a lot of the research goes into building these systems.
Cool. So you're working on the next link. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
So the working name now is Nebula, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And but in general, I'm curious. How do you know what are the important topics in research? So if there are some topics like themes in the group in general that you try to, to stay within these themes, but this is still quite broad, right? So this streaming in general is quite broad. Like, how do you know what is an important topic? Like, what are the trends in these topics? Like, how do you stay on top of that?
Well, that's hard. I mean, it's a very good question, and like, so it's something in general hard to do, I guess. I mean, it depends also a little bit on how much forward we want to look into the future. I think in general, you can tell what are like the current important topics and trends, mainly by looking at what is being published currently at the major conferences, right, in your field. And it can help even more if you attend these conferences to exchange ideas with your peers. Yeah, this helps you identify the trendy topics in the present time. Now, as I said, I have also been reviewing papers for conferences, and in general, this means that I have access to papers before they are actually published, while they're still work in progress. This, to some extent, can help foresee trends that might come up in the near future. So let's say within 1 to 3 years, maybe, because you still get access to some work that's not published and maybe won't be published that cycle, but you see what the people are working on, so this helps you form an idea. But what is really hard, of course, is to predict the next big trend that will come, let's say, in 10 years or so. And I mean, unfortunately, I cannot claim that I'm in a position to do that. But if you can really do this, it is very valuable because, I mean, these trends in research come a little bit in waves. And if you are at the beginning of such a wave and you are one of the first people to work on a certain topic before it is broadly popular, when later that topic becomes popular, so if your prediction was correct and this becomes an important topic, you will be a pioneer in the field, right? And your work will really get a lot of attention and a lot of people will refer back to it and cite it, which is something that matters. Now, in something else that I can mention here is that in the database research community, there is a tradition that every few years, I think every 5 years or so, a group of more senior database researchers gather together and in the same location, so they meet physically, and they brainstorm on what are the big trends, the next big trends, and how we as a community can get more impact out of our research. And after the gathering, they write down their findings in a report. In general, I find that this can be quite helpful for more junior researchers, to help them identify future research directions. And I mentioned before that going to conferences can also help. And one other reason that it can help is that there are also some discussion panels where again you see more senior people discuss about the future of the field.
So basically networking, right? So conferences, seeing what is published. Do you think it's important to also be in touch with maybe industry partners to see what is going on in industry, to see, what maybe will be important there, or the conferences, scientific conferences are enough?
That is a great point. And I mean, I have to say that in general, in our conferences, I mean, there are also people from industry. I mean, we are not,
Google, right?
we are a field that is quite open to industry. So definitely, I think this is also something that can help.
And funny thing that you mentioned that picking things that will be important in the future is difficult. Well, the DIMA group, I think, managed to do it at least once with Flink.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was choosing whether to go to Berlin or to some other city, so I saw a pitch from Professor Markel, and what he said was that they don't at DIMA they do not teach things that are important now. They teach things that will be important in like 3-5 years. And yeah, he would then go into Flink. Back then it was called Stratosphere, I think, like how cool this thing is. And he was actually right. Like, because back then I don't think it was really appreciated in the industry, like this Flink thing. But now, yeah, people like it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I would say in that sense, yeah, definitely Professor Martel is a visionary person. And yeah, I mean, in that sense, again, for me as a more junior researcher, it also helps, to have him as a mentor.
Okay, so but the main sort of the main way of seeing trends in research is attending conferences and then doing these gatherings and then having discussion panels. And I think you mentioned also reviewing papers, which is how typical it is for people to also work on reviewing papers. Like, do all postdocs do this or not everyone?
I would say most postdocs. I mean, to get to review papers, I mean, you have to be invited. It's invitation based. But then it is also a volunteering activity. So in general, you're not getting paid or anything to do that, right? So, but yeah, I would say most postdocs, are known enough to be invited for such things. Yeah.
You have to have a name, right?
Yeah, someone has to invite you, so they need to
like
somehow
you need to
know
publish
you.
at least a few papers, and then they say, okay, this person is clearly clearly knows what about this particular area of research. Let's invite them and ask them to review papers. Does it work like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, you need to have published some papers on your own, because I mean, it's also a little bit weird to judge other people's research if yourself have not proved that you are actually able to conduct good research. But then, it might be the case that someone has published a lot of papers, but they're still not invited for these conferences just because they don't know a key person in the committee that can actually invite them to be in the committee. So in that sense, it's also some networking. In my case, I guess I was lucky that I have been in research groups that have visibility. So both like the DIMA group and also my group at TPFL, which was called DIAS, are research groups that have international visibility, are among the best in the field. So that also helped for me to get visibility.
Yeah, thanks. And speaking of trends in research, so sometimes you come to a conference and then there is one topic that everyone talks about, like it's clearly a trend. But the next year you come and everyone forgets about this. I'm sure you can think of such things that, come in waves and then go, and a few years after that, nobody remembers about them. Right? So I would call it like hype. But there are things that, they don't get the attention they deserve. Sometimes there are other things people get more excited about them, but there are things that maybe people do not notice. Do you think there are some research topics in your area of research that are underrated right now?
Yeah, I have to say that's a difficult question, I think. So first, I'll try to give a bit of a more general answer. So one of the things that I have personally noticed in the field, and that to some extent bothers me, is that in most cases, people only focus on improving performance, which typically means, improving runtime, so measuring performance by runtime. So when you come up with a new technique and a new solution, in order to convince the reviewers at the conferences to accept your paper for publication, you usually have to show, oh, my new technique is like X times faster than all previous techniques, and then it's easy. But of course, this is important to improve, to decrease the runtime. But there are also a lot of metrics that can be important. I don't know, like the ease of adoption of a certain technique, or the usability, the programmability, or even things like energy consumption. And these metrics, in my experience, are typically a bit overlooked. So to some extent, I think this happens because they are a little bit hard to quantify and put in a number. And as a result, so that's a bit of a general answer, but as a result, I think if your work focuses on improving a metric that's other than performance, it is usually, in my opinion, a bit undervalued by the community. It's harder for you to publish your work. And then there is another broader topic that I think, I do not think it is undervalued, but maybe you could say that it's underrated, because it's a topic that everyone understands its importance, but it's still not so popular in the sense that not so many people want to work on that. And the topic is data cleaning. I think everybody would agree this is a really important and really open problem. But yeah, I don't think there are enough people working on that right now. I think this is probably a combination of factors, because it is a really hard problem. So to begin with, this is a bit scary, I think. And at the same time, again, maybe there is this issue that in the case of data cleaning, it is harder to quantify, again, the impact of new approaches and convince the community about their value. Again, you cannot just say, and you cannot just go and say, oh, I made things 2 orders of magnitude faster. It's a bit more complex than that.
I'm wondering, data cleaning is more like art than science. How do you actually quantify that? So, I guess there are metrics that measure the cleanness of data. I guess this is a tricky one. And is there research in this area?
Yeah, there is still research. Yes, of course. I don't have experience. I haven't done research in this area. I have to say that when early in my PhD, my professor mentioned this as an option back then, and I have to say that I was also a little bit negative or scared of the topic, because to some extent it still might be that yourself you recognize that the problem is important, but you also need to like it, and if for some reason you don't like it, and you cannot force yourself to work on that even if you believe that it's important. But yeah, there are people, it's not, it is an existing research area, definitely. I just think that, overall, it's still not popular enough. It's not as sexy or fancy as other topics that are probably less important.
Right now, at least in the industry, this is a very manual process. You need to do a lot of trials and errors, and then you need to handle a lot of corner cases, and then the code you have for cleaning becomes bigger and bigger with every corner case. I guess the area of research would be how to actually automate this, right? Instead of relying on this infinite loop of trial and error, how do you actually have a way to automatically figuring out what the data cleaning problems are and solving them?
That
would be handy.
The main effort would go to either fully automate, or maybe that's not still so realistic, but at least make it easier for the data scientists.
I can relate to that problem. I can imagine having a black box saying, hey, here's a pile of dirty data, please make it nice. Yeah, I would use that.
Definitely, can you imagine? Yes.
Yeah, thanks. And you also mentioned now that as a postdoc, you do a lot of work in collaboration with other postdocs. So they are on the same level, so you're not necessarily mentoring them, but you're more collaborating with them. Do you collaborate? Do you work a lot of people from different industries, maybe let's say from different groups that are not necessarily data management groups?
I have some experience, yes, working with people that are not in data management. Because in general, there are connections. It's easy to find connections from data management to other disciplines. For example, in my PhD, I was involved in a large multidisciplinary project, and that was and still is called the Human Brain Project. And one of the main goals of that project was to build three-dimensional models of the human brain and then run simulations over them. So for that project, I had a collaboration with neuroscientists that were the ones building the brain models. And then within that collaboration, I developed some like tools that allow them to access subregions of those models more efficiently. So this is the data management component. Yeah, in my experience, having this kind of collaborations does require some extra effort, because you need to find a common language. You need to find a way to communicate with someone who is outside of your field, and that's not always easy. And it goes both ways. I mean, some things that were obvious to me, I had to understand that it's not to someone outside of the field, and I have to find a way to explain to them, but also, to understand what they are telling me. But yeah, it can also be quite rewarding, because you see your work being applied to solve a real problem. Yeah.
I remember in DIMA, so like it was a 7th floor building. So we were on the 7th floor, and then sometimes I would go on the 6th floor, and then there was a group that was doing some video encoding. I don't remember, like a completely different thing. Right? And then I don't remember what was on the 5th floor, but also something unrelated. And what I found interesting is that these groups, they don't really communicate with each other. So do you, is it still the case, or you're trying to somehow find ways of connecting with each other?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, maybe now it has improved, I would say. Like, actually, there is one issue that I find a problem, as you said, that where the group is, which is the actual buildings. No, I mean, I think it's actually not so great that, yeah, the DIMA group is on the 7th floor, by itself. So everybody on that floor is from the same group. So, and then the other groups are on different floors. And then, you have a common lounge area, but when you are there, you will only see and interact with people from your own group. There's no chance you'll meet someone outside of your group where you can initiate some maybe interesting discussion. So I think that is not great. And if we had like some like lounge areas where people from different groups can hang out, this would really help a lot to bootstrap some collaborations. And I have to say, in my previous group, it was a little bit, there was a bit more mingling between, in my previous university, there was a bit more mingling between the different groups. However, you mentioned the 6th floor, so I'm not sure, which group you're referring to. But for example, right now, I am involved also in a collaboration with another group at the U Berlin, which is the remote sensing group. In this group, they are working with like satellite imagery. How to efficiently index these images, but based on their actual content, which requires some deep learning techniques that they have developed. And yes, and I mean, we have a collaboration with them to help them tackle the problem also from the data management aspect.
Yeah, sorry if it came out as a critique. I wanted to lead actually this to asking how you collaborate with other groups and how you find ways of collaborating. And this, what you brought up, like remote sensing group, it's quite interesting. Do you know how it happened? Like how you met and decided to work together? Because I guess this is also related to your area of research, like this spatial analytics.
Exactly. Yes, it does. No, but however, I mean, even though I have been I am involved in this collaboration. I have also been in collaborations before. I was not the one that like bootstrapped them, like that initiated them. I mean, this was done usually by the professors leading the groups. So I would say this was probably the case here. I mean, I was brought in touch with a professor that works in remote sensing through, my through the professor that I'm working with. So, he made the connection.
Yeah, thanks. I noticed that I've been ignoring questions, so apologies for that. So we have a few questions, and Amin is asking, his or she, I don't know. So Amin is wondering, for computer master student, what field would be good to work in order to be able to apply for a PhD position at a top European or American university?
I mean, okay, that's a good question, but I mean, of course, it's really, I would say, it depends on your interests, right? And I mean, I'm in data management, so I would, advertise and support my field. I would say, to research in data management. But in the end of the day, you should pick the topics that you like, and in the end, what matters is the quality of your research rather than the topic. Now, that said, of course, I mean, I cannot ignore that right now there is a big, let's say, focus in academia on AI and machine learning, right? I mean, I cannot ignore that. So in that sense, in these domains, there are probably more opportunities and open positions than in other domains, but also there is more competition. So this is also something to take into account. And that's why, again, it goes back to really make sure that this is something that you like and you want to do it because you like it and not because it's, the next, because it's popular right now, because there is competition. So if you don't like it enough, there will be someone else that does it and they like it and they will be better than you.
And I guess like for any field you take, you will be able to find a university or a group at some university that does this work, and you'll be able to go there.
Exactly.
But I'm curious, like, how do you go about selecting topics there? So let's say you pick a broader field, and then you want to find some topics that, and I think it goes back to the discussion we have, like, of identifying trends. So I guess this is what you can also do, right? So you can take a look at the conferences, like bigger venues in this field, and then see what are the trends there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can pick some of these trends there and try to see if you like them, right? And,
and then maybe two more things. So okay, one thing maybe is to try to do research already in your master's, because this can help you identify what you like, which can mean that you may work in your master's in the field and you see that you really like it and you continue in your PhD. But it can also mean that you try something in your master's and it's a good way to find out that you actually don't like it, and then you move on to a different area, which was a little bit the case for me. For example, like my master's thesis topic was related to signal processing, so it was not in databases. And another thing that I actually also did is that I did an internship prior to my PhD in the same group where I ended up doing my PhD. But I first worked there a few months as an intern, again, to kind of make sure that this is something I like before I commit to something bigger like a PhD. And in addition to that, in my previous university, EPFL in Switzerland, and there might be other universities that apply the same thing, I'm not sure about that, but there was a chance that if you're selected with a fellowship, you can actually spend your first year at the university working on different groups until you decide which is a group where you actually want to stay and do your PhD. So that also gave some students the flexibility to try different things and identify what they like.
And, actually, maybe this is something you can also help. This is a question that comes up in the community quite often, maybe at least once in a month, is especially during the times when students need to select a topic for their master thesis, is like, how do I actually select a topic? Do you have any advice for those students? How can they pick a topic for the master's studies, for the thesis?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, at least that in my group, everybody advertises the topics, right? So you don't have to come up, like master students don't really have to think from scratch about the topic, but they can go through a list of advertised topics that each of them comes with a description as well, right? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I would say, again, it goes back to what you find interesting. But also, okay, one other aspect is to maybe also make sure that you have enough background for that topic, because or if you don't, that you are aware of that and that you're really prepared to, you know, cover the missing background, because otherwise it can be like a bad, negative experience to work on something that you don't have the skill set for. So yeah, and I mean, then to some extent, sometimes also who you're working with can be as important as the topic, or in some cases even more. So, you know, I would also say to be careful in choosing your mentor, and, you know, make sure that you have a good connection to that mentor and that you're aligned in terms of, you know, how you work together.
Yeah, so in practice, it means basically finding a PhD student whose research you like, and then trying to see how you can help them in their PhD research, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least this is how it was for me, and I got the
Mm-hmm.
impression that this is how it works. So
Mm-hmm.
I remember we had like a sort of meeting, and then PhD students would come and pitch the topics that they're working on. And then whoever likes the topic would come then and directly approach the PhD students saying, hey, I like what you're working on, let's do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true, because I mean, PhD students are also involved in teaching, so it's actually an opportunity for like master and bachelor students to interact with them and see what they're working on, and have some discussions about potential topics. So in that sense, you can also cover what I said, that like, you know, to have a mentor that you're happy with, because you actually can work with a person that you are already familiar, because you had that person as a teacher in some course. And to me, it happens a lot that the students that end up doing a thesis with me, they are students that already know me from some course where I was involved. They're not complete strangers.
Okay. And what advice would you give to somebody who is just graduating from masters and they are not sure whether they want to continue researching and do a PhD, or they just want to work in the industry? I think this is quite a difficult problem. Like, I remember for me, it was a difficult decision. Like, do you have any suggestion or like advice for people who need to decide, to help them do this?
I mean, yeah, to some extent, it's a bit what I already said, which is already like give it a try, but like at a smaller scale. So before you start a PhD, to try to do some research either in your master's or like as part of an internship. And I mean, one important thing that comes with that is that you can have more fun actually doing research than in your PhD, because there's also less pressure. There is no pressure to publish. Doing research in your master's is completely optional. There is no clock ticking telling you that in 3 years you need to publish 3 papers. So you actually can have more fun, I think. I mean, then the same way, so I'm someone that unfortunately doesn't have industry experience, but I mean, I would say the same way also you can try to do some internships also in the industry, right? Work also for some companies. So, you know, you try both, and then hopefully it will become clear what you like more. Yeah.
Okay, so doing thesis and then also doing internship, and then like seeing what you like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually a good point about no pressure to publish. Because I remember, like, when I was writing my thesis, we decided to publish it as a paper after I graduated. So it was a lot. Nobody forced me like, "Hey, write this paper, or you will not graduate. You will not get your master's."
Yeah.
But with PhD, if you don't write your paper, then you do not graduate, right?
Yeah, with no publications, you cannot graduate.
Yeah, that's Because with the master thesis, you just defend it, and then your advisor, supervisor says, okay, like this is this kind of mark, and then the people, the jury who watch the defense, they say, okay, yeah, this is the mark, and then you get your papers, right? But so with PhD, you still have to do that, but on top of that, you need to have like quite a bunch of papers published at top venues, right?
Yeah.
That's tough.
And yeah, different groups have different requirements in terms of how many papers you are expected to publish. But yeah, in general, it's always at least one. I mean, broadly speaking. I mean, at DIMA, it's typically actually 3, and like 3 at the top conferences. So it is not easy.
And one last thing I wanted to ask you, and this is actually something we also talked with a guest a few podcasts ago. So with Barbara, who is taking part in Women in Data Science community. So and there, the question some of the somebody from the audience had to hear is like, how can we promote computer science to female students, because this is not very popular among female students, and in general, data science, computer science, these are like I would say male-dominated areas. What do you think we can do to attract more female students to research in computer science?
Yeah, so yeah, this is a topic like that I like to talk about, and I personally also find it very important. Yeah, there are a lot of discussions on that topic. So I will actually try then to give my personal experience and perspective and share with you, what attracted me personally to first study computer science and then pursue a career in research, and then try to see how this could apply more generally for other women as well. So, okay, to begin with, in my case, my choice was influenced by my father, actually, because he's a professor of computer science in Greece. So in my case, I was a bit lucky. Let's say I had this influence in my home. But then, like now taking this to the general case, I think it is important that we organize events for younger students in high school or even primary school, in particular female ones, but it can, like, these events could be addressed to all students, where we can students can see what computer science is, but in a very gender neutral way. And yeah, I really want to put emphasis on this gender neutrality, because I think it is really crucial that young students stop making this association in their minds that computer science is only meant, for geeky guys that sit, I don't know, in their basements, wearing glasses and like dirty t-shirts. I'm like over exaggerating now the stereotype from the other side, but I mean, this is how CS is often like depicted in the pop culture, right? And I mean,
in the movies,
in the movies, yes. I mean, inevitably, this actually influences people. But yeah, I think so. I think in these young ages, it is really important for students to realize that your gender and your fashion choices are like completely irrelevant, and just focus on the essence. Now, again, going back to my personal experience. So yeah, as I said, through my father, I got attracted to the field. But I mean, later on, when I was doing my PhD, for me, it was quite helpful that my PhD advisor was actually a woman. So in that sense, I had a female role model. And actually, even more, what helped me was the fact that a lot of my PhD peers in my group were also female. To me, this was actually more helpful because I could more easily relate to other women around my age who were just like 1 or 2 steps ahead of me, and I could feel that I'm not alone, and that if they are successful, then I can also be successful. So again, extrapolating what this means in general, I think it is important for universities to employ females at all levels as professors, but also to make sure that there are also female postdocs and female PhD students. Yeah, and yeah, maybe finally, the hardest part is to actually keep women in research, and more specifically in academic research in the long run. I mean, if you look, there are like all these different studies that show that in the current situation, at every stage, women are more likely to drop out than men. So to begin with, we don't have so many master students, then they get even fewer at the PhD level, even fewer at the postdoc level, and even fewer at the professor level. I think for me, this is maybe the hardest problem. It happens because it's quite hard to combine creating a family with the academic expectations that require you to be mobile and change cities or countries until you get a permanent position, while also you have to work long hours. This is one of the hardest problems, I think, to solve. Of course, some solutions go towards the direction of having better childcare and support for women. But my feeling is that it somehow goes beyond that, somehow universities need to acknowledge and be aware of the additional challenges that women may face in their personal lives, and make some adjustments for that.
We should start with schools, right? Like you said, have these events, and I guess if this event, like somebody who comes and presents, is the presenter is a guy, like, in this t-shirt, like you described, and then so maybe it's helpful to have a female presenter as well, right?
No, I can really tell you this from my personal experience, that this problem is real. When I was younger and I was starting with my PhD, I somehow really felt that, okay, the way I dress and, the fact that, I wear makeup and all that, it's somehow incompatible with me being in computer science. It's maybe a sign that I'm actually not good for that, which is crazy. But going back, I can really see that I was to some extent making this false feeling that I don't fit in the stereotype, right? And that this is probably because I'm doing something wrong, not because the stereotype is wrong, but because there's something wrong with me. So it can have an impact.
Yeah. So we should be wrapping up. If people have questions to you, how can they find you?
Well, I guess you. You have already shared, I think, my information on your website, right?
There is a link to your to the DIMA page with all your contact.
Yeah, this information is up to date. So I guess there is my email on my website. So I guess that's the easiest way.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for telling us about the work you're doing. Thanks for talking about challenges openly, and all these things. So thanks a lot. Thanks everyone for joining us today, for asking questions. And thanks, Eleni.
Thanks a lot, Alexei. It was great being in the podcast, and great to meet you.
Yeah, and sorry for technical difficulties. I hope it was fine that I was from my mobile phone.
No. After this first issue, then it was perfect. Yeah, no problem
maybe
at
I should
all.
just do this from my mobile phone all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Goodbye.
Goodbye.